My name is Jenna. I'm 29, and on New Year's Eve, my own mother invited me to dinner just so she could tear me apart. The place was nice. Everyone dressed up, champagne glasses everywhere, and I really thought maybe this year would be different. Then she leaned in close to my ear and whispered almost sweetly, "We only invited you out of pity. Don't stay too long, okay?" For a second, I actually thought I misheard her, until I saw the amused little smirk on her face. My brother burst out laughing at the table and said I was basically the failure of the family, the one who never made it, the one they had to rescue and hide. A couple of relatives chuckled. Someone muttered that at least I showed up on time for once. It was like they'd all agreed I was the joke of the night. I just sat there, holding my glass, feeling every word land like a punch. And then something in me went very, very still. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why they kept using me as a prop to make themselves feel superior. I smiled, took a slow sip of my drink, set the glass down, and told them I had an early morning. No drama, no scene. I walked out of that restaurant alone, into the cold air, with their laughter still echoing behind me. They thought I was walking away because I was weak. They had no idea that night I'd finally hit my limit. They had no idea that 1 week later, the cozy family cabin they loved so much would be gone. The accounts they depended on would be closed, and those lovely bank statements would start rolling in. If you stay with me until the end, I'll tell you exactly how one New Year's dinner turned into the week their money disappeared. 1 week after that New Year's dinner, I was sitting on the sagging couch in my tiny Seattle apartment when my phone started going insane. At first, it was just one call from my mom, then another, then three, back to back from mom's cell. I let them all go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, my brother's name flashed on the screen. Then again, then again. While it buzzed in my hand, my email notifications exploded with new messages from the bank. Subject lines like urgent notice, account changes, statement available lit up my laptop screen. I finally answered one of my mom's calls, and all I heard was panicked breathing and her voice up in that hysterical register she usually only saves for when something threatens her image. "Jenna, what did you do?" she shouted. "Do you have any idea what is happening? The cabin is gone. Do you understand me? Gone. There are strangers at Lake Chelan saying they're the new owners. They have paperwork with your name all over it." Then she jumped to the next crisis without even taking a breath. "The bank says some of our accounts are closed. The joint ones. The ones you were on. The auto payments bounced. There are fees. Your father is furious." "What have you done to us?" In the background, I could hear my dad, Martin, barking something I couldn't quite make out, and my mom yelling back that she was trying to fix it. I didn't answer right away. I let her words hang there while I stared out at the gray Seattle sky and the rain sliding down the window. Another call started buzzing in, this time my brother Ryan. I hung up on my mom and watched his name pulse on the screen. When I didn't pick up, he switched to text. Long, angry paragraphs popping up one after another. "You tanked my credit score. Do you even realize what that does to my clients? You sabotaged my summer plans, our family trips, everything. How could you be this selfish?" Then, the one that made me actually laugh out loud. "All because you couldn't handle one harmless joke at dinner." I leaned my head back on the couch and closed my eyes. 1 week earlier, I had walked out of that restaurant feeling like someone had reached into my chest and flipped a switch. I went home to my little place with its thrift store furniture and mismatched mugs, dropped my keys on the counter, and just stood there for a minute listening to the quiet. My hands were still shaking when I opened my laptop and started pulling up everything I had ever signed for that family. Old emails from the bank, digital copies of deeds, screenshots of, "Just sign this, it's no big deal," messages from my dad and my brother. I pulled out the worn folder I kept in the back of my closet, the one with paper copies of documents I never really understood but signed anyway because they said it was for the family. That night, I finally read them. Really read them. The cabin at Lake Chelan, the place they loved to brag about to friends, wasn't just in my name for tax reasons, like they'd told me. It was in my name. Period. My signature. My ownership. The family emergency credit line Ryan opened years ago, after one of his deals went bad, just happened to list me as a co-applicant. The joint account my mom swore was just for helping you build credit had been used to pay for their vacations, their upgrades, their perfect life. Page after page, it became painfully clear I was not the helpless failure they painted me as at dinner. I was the financial safety net they'd quietly wrapped around themselves. At some point, I grabbed a pen and a blank notebook and wrote 3 words at the top of a fresh page. Take it back. Underneath, I started a list. Number 1, the cabin. Number 2, every joint account with my name on it. Number 3, every loan or bill I had been tied to without a real choice. I didn't know every step yet, but I knew I wasn't going to let them keep using me. I thought about the one person I trusted who actually understood this stuff, my old college friend Maya, now a lawyer in the city. As my phone buzzed angrily in the present, with my mom wailing about strangers in her cabin and my brother blaming me for his falling credit score, I looked down at that same notebook on my coffee table. The first 3 items on that list were now neatly crossed out. They had invited me to dinner just to humiliate me. They thought I would swallow it like I always did. Instead, 1 week later, they were finally feeling what it was like to live with the consequences of their own signatures. The morning after that dinner, when the humiliation had finally turned into something colder and sharper, I called Maya. We hadn't talked in a few months, life had gotten busy, but she picked up on the second ring like she always did. Her face popped up on my laptop screen, hair in a messy bun, oversized hoodie, the exact opposite of the polished, curated people I'd just had dinner with the night before. She smiled at first and said she'd been meaning to call me anyway. Then her smile faded when she saw my face. "What happened, Jen?" she asked. So I told her. I told her about the dinner, about the whispers and the jokes, and how it wasn't even the first time, just the loudest. I told her how every time my brother's business had a hiccup, somehow my name ended up on another favor. I watched her expression shift from concern to something more focused as I swiveled the camera and showed her the stacks of documents spread out on my coffee table. Deeds, loan statements, joint account summaries, all with my name printed neatly in places I barely remembered signing for. Maya went from friend mode to lawyer mode in about 2 seconds. "Slow down," she said. "Walk me through what each of those is." We went line by line. The Lake Chelan cabin deed, where my parents had always claimed my name was there because your grandparents wanted it to feel like it was yours too. But when Maya zoomed in on the scanned copy I'd emailed her, she actually cursed under her breath. "Jenna," she said, "this isn't for tax reasons. This deed says you're the owner, not co-owner. Owner, owner." She asked about the joint credit line with Ryan, the one that had been opened just for emergencies. I told her how I never saw a single statement unless something went wrong, how my parents would just wave me off if I asked too many questions. She had me pull up the online banking dashboard and screen share. She had me scroll through transactions that read like a highlight reel of their life. Flights, hotel stays, upgrades, holiday shopping, all under an account that tied back to my social security number. The more we clicked, the tighter my chest felt. Finally, Maya leaned back in her chair and rubbed her forehead. "Okay," she said, "here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to blow up your life just to get even. We're going to follow the paper. We're going to do this clean." She made me slow down long enough to take notes as if this was a client meeting, not just 2 old friends talking. The cabin, she explained, was legally mine. If I chose to keep it, fix it up, rent it out, or sell it, that was my call. The joint accounts, she said, were trickier but still clear enough. If my name was on them, I had the right to close them or remove myself, especially if I could show they had been opened under pressure or without full consent. I asked very quietly if that meant I could pull the plug on the financial safety net they'd built around me without telling me. Maya nodded. You don't owe anyone access to your credit or your name, not even family, she said. If they wanted to play big finance games, they should have used their own signatures, not yours. Then she hesitated, biting her lip for a second before adding, there is one thing you could do that would hit them where it hurts, but you need to be sure you want to go that far. She told me about a cash buyer she knew, a couple from the tech world who had been looking forever for a second home in that exact area, someone who could move fast and pay cleanly if the right place came along, the kind of offer people like my parents would brag about for years if they were the ones making it. If you really want out, Maya said, I can call them. We can list the cabin quietly, have the paperwork ready, and close fast. Legally, there's not much they can do if the deed says what I think it does. I sat there, chewing the inside of my cheek, thinking about summers at that cabin with my grandparents, the only people who ever made me feel like I wasn't the family disappointment. I thought about my parents using that place as the backdrop for perfect family photos, posting them online like I was just too busy to join their wonderful life. Selling it felt like slicing away the only soft memory I had with them, but leaving it in their hands felt worse. I asked Maya what would happen to the other stuff if we did it her way. She laid it out like a simple recipe. First, we prep the sale of the cabin and lock in a closing date. Then, we contact the banks to close every joint account and remove you from anything you never should have been tied to. Then, we document everything. Every call, every email. If they try to come after you, we show exactly how they've been using your name and credit for years. By the time she was done, my notebook was full of lines and arrows and bullet points. The word mine circled around the cabin 3 times. I looked at that messy page and then back at the screen. I don't want to destroy them, I said quietly. I just want them to stop. Maya held my gaze and replied, sometimes the only way people like that stop is when the consequences finally land on their own doorstep. You're not stealing from them, Jenna. You're taking your own name back. I sat with that for a long minute, the silence stretching between us. Finally, I nodded. Call your buyers, I said. Let's see how fast they can move. Maya did not waste time. The morning after our call, she texted me a short message that made my stomach flip. They're interested. Can you meet this afternoon? 2 hours later, I was sitting in a quiet corner of her office, a folder in my lap, while she walked a couple in their mid-30s through photos of the Lake Chelan cabin on her laptop. They were exactly the type of people my parents would have adored selling to themselves, polished and excited, talking about summers on the lake, and maybe renting it out as a creative retreat for tech workers. There was a part of me that wanted to slam the laptop shut and tell them no, that this place was too tangled up in my life to hand over that easily. But every time that instinct rose up, I heard my mom's voice again at that dinner, the word pity curling like smoke in my ear, and Ryan's laugh when he called me a failure. So instead, I listened. Maya laid it out cleanly. The property was titled to me, taxes up to date, no liens. The buyers had their financing ready, but they also had enough cash on hand to move fast if needed. When she quoted them the price she thought we could reasonably ask, I watched their eyes flash with that hungry, this is a good deal look. Within an hour, we were drafting an offer. As we went through each page, Maya took the time to translate the legal language into plain English for me. Here is where you acknowledge you are the sole owner, she said, tapping one paragraph. Here is where you agree to transfer the title. If you sign, this is no longer theirs to control, Jenna. It is your decision, your sale. My hand shook a little when I picked up the pen, but I signed anyway. By the time I left her office, the cabin that had been held over my head for years as proof of what a generous family I had was on its way to belonging to someone who didn't even know my parents' names. That afternoon, I went home and opened my laptop to start on the second part of the list: joint accounts. I started with the easiest to stomach: the family credit card that had been used for everything from beach vacations to restaurant bills I had never seen. I called the bank, gave them my info, and asked what my options were for shutting it down. The woman on the line was polite in that detached customer service way until she pulled up the account and realized who I was. "Oh," she said, "you're the primary holder." I blinked. Wait, what? I had always been told my name was on it to help build your credit. No one had mentioned that it was technically my account, with my parents and Ryan riding on as authorized users. Once I understood that, the conversation changed. I told her, very calmly, that I wanted to close the card completely. She warned me about the balance, about how it would need to be paid off, about how the authorized users would be notified. I listened, agreed where I needed to agree, and repeated that yes, I understood, and yes, I still wanted it closed. Next was the line of credit Ryan had opened after one of his early deals went sideways, the one sold to me as just a short-term thing, just until he got back on his feet. The banker on that call confirmed what Maya had suspected. I was a co-applicant, fully responsible. Ryan had been the one using it like a revolving door. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just said I wanted my name removed and the account frozen until the bank could evaluate the risk without my information attached. They pushed back at first, then relented when I referenced a few phrases Maya had given me about consent and misuse. One by one, I moved through the list. Utility bills at the cabin under my social, a backup checking account my parents had opened with my name and their money, using it as a pass-through for expenses so they could float cash between accounts. Every time a representative told me my name was on something I barely remembered signing, it felt like a small slap. Every time I successfully closed something or removed myself, it felt like taking another step out of a net I hadn't realized I was tangled in. I documented everything, just like Maya told me to. I saved call logs, confirmation emails, screenshots of account changes. It felt petty at first, like I was building a case against my own family, but as the day went on, it started to feel like something else. It felt like proof that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined the way they had quietly wired their financial security to my identity. When I finally leaned back from my laptop, the sun outside had faded into that dim gray Seattle evening. My notebook lay open next to me, the first 3 items on my list crossed out in heavy ink. The cabin. Sold, pending closing. The joint credit card, set to be closed. The emergency line with Ryan, frozen, under review. In some parallel universe I knew, they were probably still sitting in their comfortable house telling themselves I was dramatic, that I would never really do anything. In this one, their favorite getaway was already changing hands, and the accounts they treated like invisible safety nets had just been yanked. I stared at the scribbled words on the page, then at the stack of documents on my table. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something like control settle in my chest. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't thrown a scene. All I had done was sign my own name and say one simple word they were not used to hearing from me. No. Closing those accounts and signing the cabin away should have felt like the end of it. But with my family, nothing was ever that simple. Maya kept saying the same thing every time I texted her another update. Paper trail? Jenna, protect yourself. She was right. My parents were the kind of people who hid behind phrases like family loyalty until it suited them to pretend we were just business. If I wanted this to stick, I needed something more official than phone calls and screenshots. I needed to walk into the world they trusted most: lawyers and paperwork. So, a few days after I started pulling my name off everything, I called the one person my parents trusted almost as much as they trusted themselves, the man who had been drawing up their wills and handling their estate planning for years, Harold Wheeler. Growing up, I had seen his name on envelopes on the kitchen counter and heard my dad brag that Harold was the best, that he made sure everything will be clean when we're gone. I always assumed that included me in some warm, fuzzy way. Now I wondered if it meant something else. When I called his office and gave my name, there was a pause, then a shift in tone, when the receptionist realized I wasn't calling on behalf of my parents. She put me on hold, then came back saying Mr. Wheeler had a gap later that week if I could come in. I could. The day of the meeting, I walked into a downtown office that looked like the inside of my parents' heads. Dark wood, frame certificates, tasteful art that probably cost more than my car. Harold himself was older than I remembered, his hair thinner, glasses heavier, but his handshake was just as firm. "Jenna," he said, "your mother didn't mention you were coming by." I smiled and told him that was sort of the point. We sat down, and I did what I had done with Maya. I laid out the story, the cabin, the accounts, the way my name had been used. I did not mention the dinner. I stuck to facts and paperwork, pushing a neatly organized folder across his shiny desk. For a while, he did the thing older lawyers do where they make little noises in their throat and tap the pages with a pen while they think. Then he pulled out my grandparents' old will, the one that had left the Lake Chelan property, to Jenna for her future. On paper, it looked straightforward. In practice, my parents had treated it like they owned it, and I was just lucky to be invited. Harold frowned as he compared that document to newer estate plans my parents had drawn up. Somewhere along the line, my name had quietly been shifted. Not removed, but folded in with other assets in a way that made it look like what was mine was also theirs. He did not say fraud out loud, but his jaw tightened in a way that told me he was thinking it. He asked about the joint accounts. I showed him where I had already started to close things, how the bank had confirmed I was primary on some of them. I watched the moment it clicked that if anyone looked closely, he could be the one standing between my parents and a very awkward conversation with a regulator. He took his glasses off, cleaned them slowly, and then said, very carefully, "Jenna, I have been advising your parents for a long time. I have always encouraged them to keep things clear and fair. It seems their implementation has not been as transparent as I would have hoped. Lawyer talk, for they got cute and dragged your name into places it never belonged." I asked him bluntly what that meant for me. He surprised me by answering just as bluntly. "It means," he said, "that we correct it. We recognize in writing what was intended by your grandparents and what has actually been happening with your name and credit. It also means, for my own sake, that if anyone ever comes asking, there is a clear record that I advised them to make it right." We spent the next half hour going through updates he could make. Adjustments to the estate plan that would reflect the value of the cabin being properly yours, even now that I was selling it. Language clarifying that any debts tied to certain lines of credit were the responsibility of my parents and my brother, not me. He was protecting himself, sure, but in doing that, he was also, maybe for the first time, protecting me. When I left his office, I felt like I had just quietly moved one of the biggest pieces on the board. My family loved having people like Harold on their side. Now, at best, he was neutral. At worst, he was a witness. On the bus ride home, with the city sliding by in gray and glass, I opened my phone and stared at a blank status box on Facebook. For years, my parents had used social media as their personal PR machine. Perfect holiday photos at the cabin. Ryan in tailored suits clinking glasses at rooftop bars. My mom posting selfies with captions about blessings and gratitude, all while I was cut out of the frame in real life. I wasn't about to write a call-out thread. That wasn't my style, but I was done helping them keep the illusion going. So I typed a few simple lines. Sometimes you grow up thinking certain things are family gifts, I wrote, when really your name and credit were being used as a safety net without you ever understanding the risk. This year, I finally read the fine print. I'm taking back what was legally mine, and I won't be signing anything I don't fully understand ever again. Hit post. No names. No drama. Just the truth. In a tone calm enough that anyone outside the situation would read it as a vague reflection. Within minutes, the comments started. Old friends, college classmates, people who knew me but also knew my parents through their curated lives, chimed in. Proud of you for setting boundaries. This hits way too close to home. Did something happen? Are you okay? Then the reactions I knew would sting the most. A couple of my mom's church friends commented with little heart emojis and wrote things like, "You're so brave for speaking up, sweetie. Family can be complicated, praying for you." In other words, public sympathy. The one thing my parents couldn't stand to lose. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom within 10 minutes. "What is that post supposed to mean? Take it down right now. You are making us look like monsters." A few minutes later, a text from Ryan. "Delete that. Clients can see what you post. Do you have any idea how bad this makes us all look?" I stared at their messages, at the frantic way they focused not on what they had done, but on how it might be perceived. For the first time in my life, I did nothing. I didn't delete the post. I didn't reply. I let it sit there, a small flag in the middle of my otherwise quiet feed. They had used my name in private for years to prop up their lifestyle. All I had done was start using my voice in public to reclaim it, and from the way they were reacting, you would have thought I had set the house on fire. The truth was, I hadn't even gotten started. Ryan showed up 2 days after I made that post, pounding on my apartment door like he was trying to knock it off the hinges. I had just sat down with a mug of coffee and my laptop when the banging started, followed by his voice yelling my name down the hallway. I opened the door just enough to block most of the view with my body. He still did that automatic once-over of my place anyway, eyes sweeping past my thrift store furniture and the stack of game notes on my table with that same old judgmental twitch in his jaw. "You think this is funny?" he snapped, waving his phone in my face. "You've completely nuked my credit. A client pulled out of a deal this morning because they ran a routine check and saw unusual activity. What the hell did you do?" I told him calmly that I removed myself from accounts that never should have had my name on them in the first place. That I froze a line of credit I had been tricked into co-signing. That I closed a card I was the primary on without my consent. He scoffed like I had said something ridiculous. "You're overreacting, Jenna. That stuff was under control. Dad had it managed. We were using it strategically, that's what families do." I reminded him of the time he'd called me crying at 2 in the morning because a deal had gone bad and he needed me to sign just this one thing, so he didn't lose everything. I reminded him of the vacations and dinners and upgrades that had gone on accounts tied to my social while I was eating ramen in this apartment. He didn't deny it. He just rolled his eyes and said, "It all comes out in the wash. You benefited too. You got to come to the cabin, didn't you?" That was the moment something in me snapped. I stepped back, opened the door wider and pointed to my tiny living room. "Do you see a cabin here, Ryan? Do you see a savings account fattened up by your investments? Do you see any of the benefits you're so sure I enjoyed? All I see are bills with my name on them and a family that thought I'd never actually read them." He shot back that I was ruining everything, that Mom hadn't stopped crying, that Dad was furious, that this was going to follow him for years. "You're going to cost me my career because you couldn't take a joke and a couple signatures," he said, voice rising. "It wasn't a joke when you called me a failure in front of everyone," I said quietly. "And they weren't just a couple signatures. They were my life." For a second, something like guilt flickered across his face. Then he shoved it down. "Fine," he snapped. "You want to play it this way? I'm bringing Dad. He'll explain it to you. He left without waiting for an answer. An hour later, there was another knock. Quieter, but somehow heavier. When I opened the door, my dad stood there in a pressed shirt and that same calm mask he used with clients, as if this was just another negotiation. He didn't ask to come in, he just walked past me and took the one decent chair like it was his by default. I stayed standing. "Jenna," he began, "we need to talk like adults. You've made some impulsive decisions. You're affecting more than just yourself." I told him I was perfectly happy to talk like adults. Adults read what they sign. Adults don't hide debts in their kids' names. Adults don't tell their daughter a house is for her future and then act shocked when she treats it like it actually is. His jaw tightened. "The cabin was a family asset," he said. "We managed it for you. You had no idea how to handle something like that, financially. We stepped in to protect you." "No," I said. "You stepped in to use it." I slid the folder I had brought from Maya and Harold off the table and opened it, laying out the copies of the deed, the credit line statements, the notes from Harold about updating the estate plan. I pointed to my grandparents' will, to the line that left the property explicitly to me. I showed him where my name had been woven into loans and accounts that had nothing to do with me. For the first time since he walked in, he didn't have a quick answer. He scanned the pages, his eyes moving faster at the parts with Harold's letterhead. When he realized Harold had agreed to correct the paperwork, to clarify in writing who was responsible for what, a flush crept up his neck. "You went to Harold," he said slowly, "without us." I shrugged. "You trust him, don't you? He's the best. That's what you always told everyone." He set the papers down and pinched the bridge of his nose. "All right," he said, voice lower. "Maybe we blurred a few lines over the years. But you are making a spectacle out of this. That post you made, the calls we're getting, the questions. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to build our reputation?" I told him that his reputation was his to worry about. My only concern was my name, my credit, my future. He tried a different angle then, the softer one. "We're your parents, Jenna. Families share risk. We helped you when you needed it. We covered things. We loaned you money." I asked him if he had any documentation of loans to me that looked anything like the meticulous paperwork attached to every favor I had ever done for them. He didn't answer. Instead, he sighed and leaned back, switching to what he probably thought was his trump card. "What do you want?" he asked. "Money. An apology. You want us to sign something. Just tell me what makes this go away and we can talk." I took a breath and realized that was the difference between us. He thought everything had a price tag. I told him I didn't want hush money. I didn't want a secret settlement or some back-channel promise. I wanted the accounts fixed, which was already happening. I wanted the estate plan to reflect reality, which Harold was working on. And I wanted them to stop talking about me like I was both a burden and a backup plan. I wanted out of the financial part of our family. He stared at me like I was speaking another language. "You can't just opt out of family, Jenna," he said. "You already did," I replied. "You opted me out when you invited me to dinner just so you could laugh at me." This is me catching up. For a long moment, the apartment was quiet except for the hum of my fridge. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced down, and I saw my mom's name light up his screen, along with a preview of her text. "The buyers are already moving into our cabin. People are asking questions. Please fix this." He stood up, suddenly looking older than I was used to seeing. "You've made a serious mistake," he said. "We will see what our options are." I told him that was fine and that I had kept every email, every document, every screenshot, that Harold and Maya both had copies. For the first time, I watched my father register that the power balance had shifted. He left without slamming the door, which somehow felt worse. That night, my mom called me 3 times and left 3 different voicemails. In the first, she was furious, accusing me of betrayal. In the second, she was sobbing about how their summer traditions were ruined, how the cabin had been the heart of the family. In the third, her voice was small and raw in a way I had never heard before, as she whispered that people from church were sending her my post, that she didn't know what to say, that maybe they had gone too far. I played them once, then set the phone face down on the table. For years, their feelings had been the weather in our house, controlling what everyone else was allowed to feel. For once, the storm was theirs to sit in, not mine. And beneath all their anger and panic, beneath the threats and the guilt trips, there was one simple truth they were finally being forced to look at. Without my name quietly propping up their perfect life, they were going to have to stand on their own. The funny thing about consequences is they don't arrive all at once, like some big cinematic explosion. They creep in through emails and revised paperwork and awkward conversations in offices your parents used to own. A week after my dad walked out of my apartment, Harold called me himself. His voice was measured, but there was a hint of something almost like approval in it. He told me he'd met with my parents, that he had walked them through the changes he was making. The estate plan had been updated to reflect what my grandparents actually wrote all those years ago, not the version my parents had slowly twisted into something more convenient. The value of the cabin, now sold, was recorded as something I had already received and controlled, not as a vague family asset they could dangle whenever they felt generous. The lines of credit were annotated to make it clear who they belonged to. If anyone ever asked, there would be a paper trail saying I had asked for clarity and he had encouraged it. Translation: if my parents tried to drag me into a legal mess, they'd be dragging him too, and he was not about to let that happen. With that piece in place, I let myself breathe. When the money from the cabin hit my account, I didn't go on a revenge shopping spree. I paid off the last of my own legitimate debts. I set aside taxes because Maya looked me dead in the eye and said, "I love you, but the IRS will not care about your family drama." Then I did one thing just for me. I signed a lease on a small but bright studio space in a building not far from my apartment, a place with big windows and scuffed hardwood floors where I could actually spread out my game ideas without balancing them on the edge of my kitchen table. The first time I unlocked that door and stepped into a room that was mine, not ours or the family's, I felt something uncoil in my chest I hadn't even known was tight. I hung a couple of framed sketches from games I'd worked on, set my laptop on a second-hand desk, and sent Maya a picture. She replied with 3 words. "About time, Jenna." Back on my parents' side of town, things looked different. Ryan had to let go of the sleek condo he'd been so proud of and move into a smaller townhouse. Some clients stayed, some quietly drifted to other advisors who didn't have unusual activity, shadowing their reports. My mom still posted on Facebook and Instagram, but the tone had shifted. The constant bragging softened into something more careful, like she was aware people were actually reading between the lines now. One afternoon, a few weeks after everything, she messaged me asking if we could meet somewhere neutral, just us. I agreed, with conditions. No money talk, no guilt trips, no pretending nothing had happened. We met at a coffee shop. She looked smaller without the armor of our house around her. For a minute, we just sat there, stirring our drinks, the silence between us full of all the things we'd never said. Then she did something I never expected. She apologized. Not the kind of half apology I grew up with, the "I'm sorry if you felt that way" maneuver. A real one. She said she was sorry for laughing at me at dinner. She was sorry for calling it pity, when really it was control. She was sorry for signing my name onto things without thinking about what it would cost me. She said she had spent years telling herself they were helping me, that it was all for my own good, because that story made it easier to ignore the ways they were using me. I listened. I didn't rush to comfort her. When she finished, I told her I appreciated the apology, but that words weren't going to magically reset anything. I told her I wasn't cutting them out of my life completely, but the version of me they were used to, the one who signed whatever was put in front of her to keep the peace, was gone. From now on, no joint accounts, no favors that look like the family emergency line of credit, no more using my work or my life as a punchline to make themselves feel better. If they wanted a relationship with me, it would have to be on terms that didn't require me to shrink. She nodded, eyes shiny, and for once didn't argue. My dad took longer. He never said the words "I'm sorry" out loud, not exactly. But he stopped trying to convince me I'd overreacted. When we finally did talk, months later, he admitted that he had assumed I would never push back, that he didn't think I'd notice the way things were set up because you never cared about money. I told him that not caring about money and not caring about being lied to were two very different things. We're not a warm, hug-it-out family now. There are still weird pauses in conversations, still a gap between the world they built and the one I chose. But there is also something we never had before: boundaries. They stand on their side with their choices. I stand on mine with mine. Here's the thing I wish someone had told me years ago. The thing I want you to hear if any part of this sounds familiar. Family can be a source of love and support, but that doesn't give them unlimited rights to your time, your energy, or your signature. Being related to someone does not mean you owe them your credit score, your savings, or your silence. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to read the fine print, ask uncomfortable questions, and say no when everyone expects you to say yes. It doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you responsible. This story isn't legal advice, and if you're dealing with anything like it, you should absolutely talk to a real lawyer or a financial counselor before you act. But I hope it reminds you of this. You are not a safety net, and you are not a punchline. You are allowed to outgrow the role your family chose for you. You are allowed to take your name back. And if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect, I want you to know you're not alone in picking yourself.